After years of waiting, we finally have a new take of the Fantastic Four, this time from Marvel Studios. Marvel's first family is finally home, and this franchise has had a rough go in live action, a very rough go. I mean, what is this? There's always been so much potential for a great Fantastic Four movie, one that dives into the family and team dynamic in a compelling way. The Fantastic Four are characters with a lot of charm and lightheartedness, but there are also dramatic elements to their comics. There are real human emotions in these stories. I had hope that this movie would embody the best elements of the team that make the comics so good, because none of the movies that we've had have been able to do that. At least not in full. A lot of people have been waiting a long time for a strong cinematic interpretation of the Fantastic Four. So how did this movie turn out? The Fantastic Four First Steps is directed by Matt Shakman, and it follows a family of superheroes, the Fantastic Four, in an alternate retrofuturistic universe. The team has to deal with an impending threat to Earth and do what they can to keep their families safe in the process. I'm gonna start off by saying this is a really good movie. The Fantastic Four have finally been done justice on the big screen. First, let's talk about the characters and the actors that play them. Pedro Pascal is good as Reed Richards, also known as Mr. Fantastic. In the comics, Reed has the weight of being one of the strongest minds in the universe, and that's present in this movie. Pedro is able to bring that element to life. In this movie, they do a good job at showing how Reed struggles to balance being the smartest man in the world while also being a family man, and how sometimes one can negatively impact his ability to be the other. But he's still a man that loves his family. There's a lot of dread and weight that Pedro is able to portray as Reed, but also a sense of charisma. I like how he has this heightened, sophisticated vibe to him in contrast to the rest of the team. Vanessa Kirby is great as Sue Storm, also known as Invisible Woman. The character loves her family and she'll do anything to protect her child. Sue's powers include turning invisible and creating force fields, obviously, but Sue also has the ability to connect with people and make them trust her. And Vanessa Kirby really helps sell this element of the character and makes it believable. Joseph Quinn is really fun as Johnny Storm, also known as the Human Torch. The character has a fun, witty energy, and he can be a bit of a jerk at times, but he has a good heart. He also has this ambition and this sense of adventure, and it makes you want to root for him. And his enthusiasm makes him fun to watch. At certain points, you see how Johnny has the ability to bring out the best in people and to motivate them to do the right thing. Ben Grimm, also known as The Thing, is this big tough guy with a good heart. And Ebon Moss-Backrack is great as the character. You see how he has to deal with the loss of his previous life, as he's no longer just a regular guy. And we see how this affects his confidence and how he interacts with people. In this movie, we see the character try to navigate his path forward and move on with this new version of himself. I was really excited when they announced Ebon was playing the character, and that's because of his work in The Bear. In The Bear, Richie is this guy who has a bit of a loudmouth, and he's abrasive at times. But the character is also pretty funny, and he has some vulnerable moments. So there's a duality to the character, and Ebon is able to bring that to the role of Ben Grimm. I think they give this story enough focus to the point where I can say that they do it justice, even if I think there could have been a bit more emphasis on the tragedy of the character. I also would have liked a bit more focus on the character's subplot with Natasha Lyonne's character, Rachel, as they have good chemistry. After watching the movie again, I've grown to appreciate this character's story in the movie even more. And oddly enough, that's partially due to how they utilize his beard. I'll get more to that later. Let's talk about the team dynamic. The team bounces off each other very well, in a way that feels natural. They have good chemistry. There are times where the characters are fun to watch together, but the characters also have friction at certain points. There's the classic Ben and Johnny dynamic where they have this brotherly relationship and they butt heads at times. Reed and Sue love each other, and Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby sell the relationship very well. I was able to buy them as a loving husband and wife. But there's definitely some friction that the characters face when the stakes get high, and it adds weight and authenticity to the relationship. But I think this plotline could have been resolved in a way that was a bit more concrete. But I'll get more into that later. There's a moment in the movie where the team is in space and Johnny's talking, and for some reason, I got the vibe I'd get watching season 4 of a sitcom where all the actors are just really comfortable as their characters, and they're really in their element after playing them for so long. So that's to say that the actors feel comfortable as their characters in this movie, despite the fact that this is their first time playing them. An element of the Fantastic Four comics I really like is the slice of life element. The downtime between the large scale universal threats where the stakes are low and you get some fun wholesome moments. And this movie has that. There's this fun montage with Herbie, but there's also the scene shown in the marketing of Ben, Johnny, and Herbie in the kitchen. And these scenes flesh out the characters and their personalities in fun ways. So let's talk about the villains. Before this movie, Galactus was a character that had not been shown a lot of respect in movies, as he appears as a big stupid cloud in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. He's not the easiest character to adapt, but come on guys. I think this movie does a decent job at making Galactus feel tangible and not too goofy. And because this movie doesn't take itself too seriously, but serious enough, Galactus doesn't feel out of place. If this movie didn't embrace its comic book nature as much, maybe I wouldn't feel that way. And not only that, but the design of Galactus includes a lot of detail and texturing that makes him feel more real. You know, we make fun of Marvel for adding a lot of lines to their suits, but sometimes they need to, and in the case of Galactus, it's necessary. And Ralph Ineson is great as the character. He delivers his lines with this ominous deep voice, and he gives the scenes he's in a sense of impending doom. This version of the character is truly what you want to see out of a cinematic interpretation of Galactus. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, I don't know what you want, but this is a really cool version of the character. I also like this version of the Silver Surfer. This time it's not Norrin Radd, it's Shia LaBeouf, played by Julia Garner. There are points where she's cold and emotionless, but there are also points where her humanity seeps through. The character has some really cool moments, and I like her chemistry with Johnny. I like the voice Julia Garner uses for the role. It feels otherworldly with a vocal inflection kinda alien-like. That, coupled with the effect that they put over it and how emotionless it sounds, makes it feel eerie at times. It's great. So, something I really like about this movie is that the Fantastic Four are the only superheroes in their universe, at least that we know of. And I like this because it really adds pressure to the team. The people of New York have no one else to look to but the Fantastic Four. And because of the added pressure, it changes how the characters interact with each other. It adds more friction. You feel the weight of the world on their shoulders in this movie. And they're also put in a very unique predicament that we've never seen in a comic book movie before. And it makes for an interesting story. I really like the vibe of this movie. I, for one, really like the retro-futuristic setting, partially just because it's a fun aesthetic to look at. I like the mix of the futuristic technology mixed with the classic 60s vibe. An example of that is the Fantastic Car. I also really like that the team is from the 60s because the Fantastic Four were created during the Silver Age of comics during the 1960s. And because of that, their older comics have a charming, campy vibe to them. So it's a fun way to pay homage to the characters' roots. This setting really helps the movie stand out from other MCU movies. It's a nice change every so often to get a unique setting in these movies so that we're not always on the 616 version of Earth. In this movie, the people of New York really love the team. There's a lot of memorabilia made for them, such as the Thing Halloween masks. It's cheesy and it helps construct a fun vibe for the movie. I also like the talk show element with that Ted guy. In terms of the supporting cast, a standout is definitely Harvey Elder, also known as Mole Man, played by Paul Walter Hauser. When he plays a character, it always fits him very well, and I have trouble picturing somebody else playing a character just like he does, giving off the same energy. He just has a really unique comedic energy to him, and that's no different here. Watching the final fight of this movie was kinda surreal. It feels like a Fantastic Four comic come to life. It's great. I don't want to say what it is, but I bet you can guess what it is. And the fact that there had never been a good Fantastic Four movie before this one, and the fact that none of the movies embraced the comics like this one does, added to the third act fight feeling a little surreal and memorable. The score for this movie is another positive. Michael Giacchino does a great job with the theme. It's whimsical, it's exciting, and it fits the adventurous nature of the Fantastic Four. In terms of the special effects, they look pretty good in this movie. There's no questionable CGI. There's a space traversal sequence with some cinematic shots and large-scale moments, and they look great. And like I mentioned before, Galactus' CGI also looks good. This movie features a couple of really nice tributes to Jack Kirby and for Stan Lee. It's nice to see Jack Kirby get his flowers in a big blockbuster like this one. He did so much for Marvel and the comic book medium, and he's been underappreciated over the years. Okay, let's talk about spoilers. Let's talk about how the Fantastic Four go to space to confront Galactus. Silver Surfer allows them to meet him, and Galactus tells them that the only way he'll spare Earth is if Reed and Sue give up their baby, so that the baby can become the new Planet Eater so Galactus can rest. So the team struggles to find an alternative because there's no way they would actually give up their baby, even with the weight of the world on them and the people of New York pressuring them. After Franklin is born and the team returns to Earth, it's revealed that giving up Franklin is something that crossed Reed's mind as an optimal thing they could do. That's not to say he was actually considering giving Franklin up, but he recognized that it would solve the world's problem. This adds layers to the character. He cares for his family, but because of how his brain operates, and to the great lengths that it operates, darker thoughts cross his mind. But that doesn't mean he actually would have given up Franklin. And I also get why this upsets Sue. She says to him, "Sometimes you being you hurts me." And it's a really memorable moment. Sue wants Reed to think more like a father and less like a scientist. This movie makes an effort to not idealize their relationship, and it provides an interesting point of conversation in the process. And Sue has a bit of a change in her character regarding this storyline, as she eventually encourages Reed to share the dark parts of his mind if it means saving everyone. In the third act, when Reed is hesitant to share his plan to stop Galactus because it involves putting Franklin at risk, Sue tells him to just say it. So Sue grows to understand that maybe Reed's mind going to dark places can actually work to their benefit sometimes. But at the same time, this storyline isn't fleshed out enough. I think this is a solid plotline, but I think it could have had a bit more of a definitive and concrete conclusion. I think they could have outlined where Sue stands with Reed regarding this whole situation at the end of the movie. Anyway, let's talk about Sue and the Future Foundation. Sue is the leader of the Future Foundation, and during its formation, we see that Latveria isn't present, as the chair labeled Latveria is empty, which means Victor Von Doom decided to not attend. This is a nice little Easter egg for people that know of Doctor Doom's story, and it's some nice groundwork. But this isn't the only Doctor Doom tease in the movie, as we'll get to another one later. Sue is also able to get Harvey Elder, also known as Mole Man, to trust her even if he doesn't trust humanity, as she's able to get him to agree to having Subterranea, this underground civilization, establish peace with the surface. And this shows the positive impact Sue has on people and her ability to make them trust her. Another example of Sue doing this and being the voice of reason is when she gives a speech outside the Baxter Building after the people of New York find out about the situation with Galactus. She tells them she will not sacrifice her child for the world, but she will not sacrifice the world for her child. And this is a standout moment from Vanessa Kirby. She helps give you the sense that she has a lot weighing on her with being a new mom, but she also wants to keep the people of New York safe and calm. Despite everything that's happening, she wants to be uplifting, and Vanessa Kirby really helps sell the scene. So let's talk a bit more about Ben Grimm. Ben Grimm is such a great Marvel character. He has this tragedy to him, but he doesn't let it defeat him. He learns to move on with the hand that he has been given and make the most out of who he is. And this translates well to the movie. Early on in the movie, he forms a connection with a teacher on Yancey Street, Rachel, and there seems to be some romantic chemistry, but Ben struggles with his confidence throughout the movie, and at one point he's afraid to talk to Rachel. But that's when the beard comes in. Because of how the world has to conserve power to charge Reed's teleportation device to defeat Galactus, Ben can't shave, and this leads to Johnny complimenting him on his beard. So for the rest of the movie, Ben rocks a beard, and this starts to give him some confidence. This is who he is now, so he's learning to live with it and to make the most out of it. And this leads to him gaining the confidence to go talk to Rachel. Could they have maybe leaned into the tragedy of the story a bit more to make this more effective? Sure. Could they have maybe fleshed out his chemistry with Rachel a bit more? Sure. But I do like this storyline. So let's talk about Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf becomes the Silver Surfer after Galactus spares her world in exchange for her being his herald, so she can travel the galaxy and find planets for him to consume. And at one point in the movie, there's a flashback on Zenla that shows that Shia LaBeouf had a daughter. And this makes you understand why she had to do what she did, because she wanted to save her family and her planet. It shows what was at stake for Shia LaBeouf. And it's interesting that they chose to not show Norrin Radd in the flashback. And I say that because in the comics, Norrin Radd is the love interest to Shia LaBeouf, and he's the main Silver Surfer. And I think they did this because they didn't want to cast an actor for Norrin Radd too quickly. I think they want the freedom for a few years down the line to pick any actor they want. Not only that, but I think if he was in the scene on Zenn-La, it would have distracted people and taken some of the attention off of Shia LaBeouf. So I get why they didn't do it, but I do hope we see Norrin Radd at some point. And I like how Johnny confronts Shia LaBeouf and he plays the audio of the innocent people whose planets were destroyed by Galactus. And this is all groundwork for a great moment that Shia LaBeouf has later in the movie. I'll get into that in a little bit. So let's talk a bit more about Galactus. So the final fight of the movie is a fight against Galactus in New York. The team devises a plan to teleport their Earth across the universe to get away from Galactus. But when the plan goes wrong and they have to change things up, they attempt to teleport Galactus instead. Galactus at one point gets a hold of Franklin, and Franklin's just levitating in midair. The visual of a baby levitating midair is funny to me. It doesn't ruin the scene though, but it just adds a bit of humor. But eventually the team is able to turn the tides, and right before Johnny sacrifices himself to push Galactus into the teleportation device, Silver Surfer knocks him out of the way. I like this moment because it shows the impact that Johnny had on Shia LaBeouf. He motivated her to do the right thing, and the determination on her face as she speeds towards Galactus, so eager to redeem herself and get revenge on Galactus, makes the moment hit harder. So will we ever see Galactus again? Maybe. He's an iconic Marvel villain, so I don't know if Marvel would just want to use him as a one and done. In recent years, Marvel's been doing a better job at keeping their villains alive so that there's a possibility that they can return later at some point. So because Sue uses all her energy to push Galactus into the teleporter, she dies. This scene has a sense of weight to it. The looks on the rest of the team's faces and the silence adds to the impact. Did I fully expect her to stay dead? No, because it's an MCU movie. But it's a strong moment, all things considered. But then Franklin uses the power cosmic to revive her. And it adds a bit of a goofy element to the scene because it's a magical baby that can bring people back to life, but it's not goofy enough to ruin the scene. I think this is a very memorable scene. So they don't actually leave Earth by the end of this movie like I thought they were going to, because if you remember the post-credit scene to Thunderbolts, it ends with a spaceship with the Fantastic Four logo heading towards Earth. But we didn't get that. So I'm curious to see what happens in Avengers Doomsday. I'm willing to bet we'll see them come to the 616 at the beginning of that movie. Something I think is really nice is the Easter egg during the part of the movie where Silver Surfer first comes to Earth and she confronts the team in Times Square. During her arrival, you see how it grabs the attention of a couple of guys in an apartment with comic book art everywhere. And if you're a fan of Marvel Comics, I'm sure you can see how strikingly similar the art is to that of Jack Kirby's. I'm not sure if it's actually his artwork or if it's just made to look like his style, but it's a very nice moment. Not only that, but the two guys in this scene look very similar to a young Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And this was a very nice thing to include for two titans of Marvel. With the Fantastic Four being some of Marvel's earliest icons and them being one of the earliest collaborations between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, this was a nice thing to include. There's some funny moments in this movie as well. I like when Harvey roasts Johnny and he says to him, "Don't be mad at me, Johnny, I didn't dress you." The dynamic between Ben and Johnny also makes for some funny moments. I like when Ben says something like, "He barely has a grasp on the English language." So let's talk about the mid and post-credit scenes of the movie. There's a 4-year time skip and we pick up with Sue and Franklin at the Baxter building, and Sue leaves Franklin briefly to go get a book. But when she returns, she sees Dr. Doom with Franklin. We don't get a good look at Dr. Doom, but we see his cloak and we see he's holding his mask in his hand. So this is actually the first appearance of Dr. Doom in the MCU. We don't get a full look at him, but technically it is the first appearance of the character. Dr. Doom is such an important character and I hope they get him right. Robert Downey Jr. playing the character intrigues me, but it's not ideal. I think it would have been nice to have a standard, traditional Dr. Doom, and not some kind of alternate universe Tony Stark, but they could create a very interesting and creative story here, so I'm not gonna knock it just yet. Also, we only have one more movie before Avengers Doomsday, and that's Spider-Man Brand New Day. So it does get me a bit nervous that we've barely seen Dr. Doom before Doomsday. But the Russos made 4 great MCU movies, and I like Robert Downey Jr., so I do have hope. So let's talk about the post-credit scene. Post-credit scene begins with a quote from Jack Kirby. "If you look at my characters, you will find me. No matter what kind of character you create or assume, a little of yourself must remain there." And to me, this quote is essentially about how, for people to be able to latch onto your characters, you need to pull from your own authentic feelings and experiences for that to happen. That's how your characters will come to life. They need to feel real in one way or another. It's nice that Marvel included this. Jack Kirby's work at Marvel and his impact on comics can't be understated. The post-credit scene itself is a fun little intro for the Fantastic Four cartoon that they have in their universe. It's a fun little scene, nothing crazy. Overall, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about this movie. It's really fun and it goes by fairly quick. It has entertaining characters with good chemistry. There are a couple of storylines that could have been fleshed out a bit more, but what we get of those storylines works. This movie has a good mix of fun and lively moments with more dramatic human moments. This is a really good movie and a worthy introduction to the Fantastic Four in the MCU. Marvel's first family has finally been done right on the big screen, and I'm excited to see them show up in future projects. So tell me what you think about the Fantastic Four first steps in the comment section, and make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.